The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the June 7th meeting of North Carolina Local Government Commission, calling into order. We'll be going through the normal process this morning. They called for General Assembly to present to a committee at 2 o'clock. Had no way of knowing this weeks ago until last week. And Sharon is not here, and she's going to be chairing the meeting remotely. And Ted Brand's going to be, as chief of staff, voting in my stead. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Sharon after asking Cindy for a roll call of the members to determine our quorum.
All right. Auditor Wood.
Here.
Okay, it's virtual. Secretary Marshall. Here. It's here in person. Secretary Penny.
Here.
It's here in person. Mr. Burns.
Here.
It's here in person. Mr. Butler.
Here.
Thank you. Virtual, Ms. Harvey.
Here.
Here, also virtual, and Councilwoman Hoffman. is
Here.
Here virtually. Mr. Phil Beck.
Here.
See, there he is. And Treasurer Falwell is here, and Ed Brin is here.
Thank you.
And that,
Good.
we have Sharon Edmondson is
Here.
virtual, thank you, and Jennifer Wimmer, also virtual. Susan McCullen, in person, Jeff Tomasco in person, Ms. Lewis joining us, and I'm Cindy Aiken. That's it.
And Ben, if you're joining us, if you're listening, maybe come down, that'd be great, our general counsel. Please stand and join our Pledge of Allegiance. The Secretary Marshall will lead us in the salute to our North Carolina flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I salute
The flag of North Carolina
and pledge to
our state,
love, loyalty.
Thank you, Secretary Marshall. I'll now turn the meeting over to Cindy to talk about housekeeping and meeting procedures. After that, you have a conflict of interest statement. Then I'll turn the meeting over to Sharon to be the chair.
Thank you. This is Cindy. Nothing new. Same procedures. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Please identify yourself when you are speaking, and especially to make motions and seconds. It's very helpful for outside third-party listeners who may not know your voice to know who is speaking. If you have to leave during the meeting, please notify us, because if you're remote, we need to mark that in our minutes. And when you return, unless there's any objection, we'll continue the process of the folks who make a motion and second will be considered yes votes, and we will not call on you during the roll call. And all votes will be by roll call. If you need access to the agenda, it's on the www.nctreasure.com website at the Local Government Commission page. If we have changes in order, we'll be announcing that during the meeting. If you have any problems, you can email SLGFD, that's State and Local Government Finance Division, initials at nctreasure.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And I'll turn it over to Sharon just for housekeeping. We'll be in Tyrrell County in September, and we'll have technology set up in cabins. I'm sorry, we brought the bunk bed assignments down for the LGC members, and we have all spaced out. So the bunk beds at the 4-H club. So Billy, if you're going, you need to let us know that. So put you in the queue. And then in November, we're going to be at Western Carolina University. We're doing it in November. The hotel rooms are cheaper. And the public policy folks are very excited about bringing students in who are interested in public policy to actually witness an actual local government commission meeting happening. And the professor,
Treasurer.
Professors and the chancellor are very excited about us being at Western Carolina University. So just wanted y'all to put that in your planning purposes. The Far East in September and the Far West in November. So thank you for listening.
Sharon, we're at the conflict statement.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. LGC members, if you please take a moment to look at the agenda, and I'll ask the question, does anyone present have an actual potential or appearance of a conflict of interest as to these matters?
Ron Penny, I live in Johnson County. I get no benefit other than the other citizens, but I see two things on the agenda.
Yes, sir. Thank you for mentioning that. You are not required to recuse. That's an exception.
I have property in Johnson County.
Okay. So you are similarly situated, so that's one of the exceptions.
This is Nancy Hoffman, just noting that the city of Greensboro has 2 items on our agenda today, but again, I have no financial interest in those, and I think we've determined in the past that it's perfectly okay for me to consider these.
In your position as councilwoman, this is Cindy Aiken, I'm sorry. I was actually expecting you to suggest a recusal due to your position on the council.
Yeah, I could. This came up in the past when it was Guilford County. So yeah, that's fine if we feel that that's appropriate.
I believe so, since you are actually an elected official making decisions on the council.
Okay. I just assumed it would fall into the same category as the county did, but that's perfectly fine. I understand.
I see LGC members nodding heads. And okay, all right. Okay, if that we'll note you as recusing on the Greensboro matters.
All right, thank you, Cindy. So first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the May 3rd, 2022 meeting. You have those minutes in your packet. Do I hear a motion to approve?
State Auditor Beth Wood, so moved.
Second, Burns.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Cindy, please call the roll.
All right, Secretary Marshall. Aye. Thank you. Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Butler. We'll come back. This is Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Mr. Brin.
Aye.
Mr. Butler. Back to you. Thank you so much. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Cindy. We'll move on then to our FPIC items. And because Ms. Hoffman is recusing herself for the Greensboro items, we'll take those first just so we can get them out of the way. And then we'll proceed with the city of Shelby. Greensboro actually has 2 items, and we'll vote on these individually. I'll describe the first one, then turn it over to Susan, and then we'll move on to the second. So the first item for Greensboro is $135 million of GO bonds. These are for a variety of projects: housing, parks and rec, firefighting facilities, law enforcement facilities, and transportation. They are expected to increase taxes up to 1.25 cents to cover the debt service. Greensboro is a AAA rated unit. And Susan is, I'm going to turn it over to Susan to talk about an FPIC item that they had in their financial statements. We initially did not consider that this was significant enough to bring to the commission, but it received a lot of media attention. And in the end, we felt it would be better just to go ahead and discuss it. So Susan, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Sharon.
The city of Greensboro actually had 3 FPIC financial performance indicators of concern that showed up after their 2021 audit. The first one was related to their general fund. The city had a fund balance available that was 21.96%, almost 22% at June 30, 2021. Our threshold for units with similar size budgets is 25%. So they were just shy of that. The second indicator, the city was not able to get their financial statements filed with the commission until January 13th of 2022. Their delay there was because they were waiting on a compliance testing supplement for the American Rescue Plan that wasn't available until December. And we saw lots of local governments deal with that same delay for that same reason. The third FPIC that they had was that they reported a material weakness or significant finding in their financial statements. They actually had a significant deficiency that there was not documentation that evidenced the city's monitoring of subrecipients for the emergency rental assistance program. And so the town began developing procedures that were completed in the spring of this year. Concerning the, I talked about the late audit. I talked about the significant deficiency. The town actually provided 2 responses to us. The first dated March 31st that addressed the late audit and the compliance finding with the subrecipient monitoring documentation. The second response that was dated May 5th, and both of these are in your packet, the city addressed the fund balance concerns. They do believe that their existing fund balance level is sufficient, and it may very well be. It's very close to the minimum, and as the larger communities, a lower fund balance tends to be appropriate just because the numbers are bigger. But they decided to adopt, the board decided to adopt a 25% fund balance goal as a prudent decision to allow them some additional flexibility. So you've got a copy of their response, and their board adopted resolution that they did on May 5th, and their response was satisfactory.
Madam Secretary, for the City of Greensboro, we do have the Finance Director, Marlene Druga, and City Council Member Mr. Hugh Holston, and Assistant City Manager Mr. Larry Davis on the phone.
Thank you, Victoria. Welcome, those of you from the City of Greensboro, and appreciate you being here today. Are there any questions for the Greensboro folks that are on the line?
I do, Sharon. So was the rental program, was that the HOPE program that had so much fraud?
Oh, excuse me, Auditor Wood, could you repeat that? We couldn't hear.
Is the rental assistance program where you did not monitor the subrecipients, is that what has been known as the HOPE program across the nation that's had so much fraud?
It's the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. I'm not sure if it's the HOPE or not.
Sharon, do you know?
If it's not the HOPE program, it's something very similar.
And then I was seeing that the City of Greensboro was planning to have procedures in place and monitoring the subrecipients. is that been done, and are you comfortable that you have monitored and reviewed and made sure that the right people got the money?
Yes, Auditor Wood, this is Marlene Druga, the Finance Director. And the more of the issue was that documentation of the monitoring wasn't in place. So procedures were being reviewed and monitored, but the actual documentation of such was not in as good a shape as we needed it to be. So we feel that, we've got our procedure manual all in place now, and the steps are certain internal controls for the appropriate monitoring to make sure that the eligible participants are actually correct. So we feel comfortable that that actually is occurring now. There's significant effort put into that review now, and going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the folks from Greensboro or for LGC staff? All right, hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve City of Greensboro $135 million in GEO bonds?
Move the approval, Penny.
Second, Burns.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, Cindy, please call the roll.
Okay, for clarification, are we voting also on the revenue bonds, did you say? The 96 million?
Just the GEO.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, Penny and Burns. Auditor Wood?
Aye.
Thank you. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Thank you. Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Mr. Bryn?
Aye.
Motion carries 8 yes, 1 recusal.
All right, thank you, Cindy. We'll move on then to the next item for the City of Greensboro. This is combined enterprise system revenue refunding bonds of $96 million. On your actual printed agenda, it's on page 12. We didn't quite get this lined up exactly the way it should have been. This bond will refund all or a portion of the enterprise system revenue bonds 2012A. The savings will be $421,923.59 in years 2023 through 2027. Public sales scheduled for June 9th, assuming that it gets approved today by the commission. And again, we have Greensboro folks still on the phone if anybody has any questions about this particular request for approval. All right, hearing none, do I have a motion and a second for approval?
I moved. Auditor Wood?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Cindy, if you would please call the roll.
Sure. Okay, that was Wood, and Secretary Marshall edged in first for the second. Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Excuse me. Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Bryn.
Aye.
Thank you. 8 yes, 1 recusal.
Thank you, and thank you to the folks from the City of Greensboro. Appreciate your being on the call today. All right, we will move on then to the other EPIC item we have, which is the City of Shelby. They are requesting approval for $135 million of, I believe they're GEO bonds, yes, for a variety of projects, housing, parks and rec. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong page.
It's $6 million?
It's 6 million. I apologize. Yeah, it's not exactly lined up as I expected it to be on my page here. So I'm sorry, $6 million. Far cry from 135 million. GO bonds for the city of Shelby. They also had an FPIC. Couple of issues. I'll turn it over to Susan to describe those.
Okay, the city of Shelby, the description of those starts on page 3 of your attachment A. They had 2 FPIC items on their 2021 as a result of the 2021 audit. The first one, the town had, or the city rather, had material or significant deficiency findings. They actually had a prior period adjustment that was required in the 2021 fiscal year statements that related to a prior year. They had omitted the purchase of land and the related obligation. There wasn't any misstatement of the government's net position in the prior year. Those 2 items offset, but both capital assets and long-term debt were understated. So they have since revised their business processes and put their internal controls so that they don't miss those transactions. The second item, the city transferred $1,314,231 out of the electric fund to the general fund and other governmental funds. The city is not a member of the Eastern Municipal Power Agency, so they're not subject to the statutory limitation in 159E-39. However, they did transfer a significant amount of money from the electric to the general fund. 900,000 of this was for operations. And they did acknowledge in their response that each fund should be self-sustaining, which is what the LGC and accounting standards or accounting gap anticipate, that each fund will be self-sustaining. The city's response is attached. They did acknowledge, like I said, that each fund should be self-sustaining. They also noted that there was some statutory authority in 159.13B14 that authorizes the local government to transfer amounts once operating expenses, capital outlay, and debt service were funded. The other, a substantial amount of this fund, $414,000 was transferred for economic development. So you have the city's responses and the FPIC report that came out of our system.
Thank you, Susan. Before we move on, I will do a better job of describing the debt issuance here, and I apologize. The $6 million is for streets and sidewalks improvements. This is going to be a private negotiated sale to JP Morgan Chase at a rate not to exceed 2.7%. They previously sold $10 million of GO streets and sidewalks bonds back in September of 2021. And I think that's everything I have on that. So,
Madam Secretary, we do have one person from the city of Shelby, the Director of Finance, Beth Bean, online.
all right, thank you. Do any LGC members have questions for the finance officer of Shelby?
I have a couple. This is Beth Wood. I have a couple for you, Sharon, or Susan. So I'm looking at the information that we have in our notebooks, and the FPIC excerpts from the FPIC. One of them talked about the electric fund, and it talks about, if you're not subject to this limitation, are you or aren't you? And if you're not, what'd you do with the money? And do you plan to continue this practice of transferring money out of the electric fund to pay for things in other funds that should be self-sustaining? Am I looking at this correctly? And their answer is yes, we plan to continue this practice.
Susan, I'll let you-
Madam Auditor, I did speak to the city manager about that and the city finance officer. That's correct. That is the expectation. They made a point of not increasing the amount of transfers from the electric fund to governmental funds, but they have not eliminated them. And that is, so what I did is I spoke with them, both of them at length, about our concerns about this. So we actually talked about delaying this item and revising their response some and getting something else in writing. But because of some very favorable terms in their bank bid that would have harmed the community if we delayed it, we went ahead and brought this item before you today. And the city is prepared to talk with you about what their next steps are for these transfers.
Because I just want to say, when I was with the Local Government Commission 25 years ago, part of my job was to go out to the city of Shelby and talk about these transfers and how the fund should be self-sustaining. And you know, obviously, if you've got enough money to pay for your assets in the electric fund and then run your operations and then have money left over to, you know, any repairs and maintenance in the future, and then fund things in the general fund that should be funded with other sources of revenue, you need to quit it. And here we are 25 years later and they're still doing it. So it appears, and I get they're not under any kind of statute that says that there is a limitation, but it appears they just sort of thumbed their nose at what was talked to them about 25 years ago. So, and I have to believe that the electric customers are paying for things that other users of these services are supposed to be paid for, whether it's through property taxes or whatever. So I'm just not inclined to approve debt for a city that's not listening. I mean, there are reasons that these recommendations are being made. There are reasons that the LGC has provided them this precaution, and so I'm not inclined to approve debt for a city that just ignores what prudent behavior looks like.
Sharon, this is Paul Butler.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Butler.
Sharon, is Shelby a member of the the statewide electricities organization?
I believe they are, but they're not part of the
Yes, they are.
Eastern.
Not part of the Eastern, they're part of the statewide then.
Yes.
And
Yes.
are they current with their obligations for the bonds to service that debt, for the electricity's debt?
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume that their electric fund is in fine shape. Yeah. And we did talk about, I did talk with Rick Howell, the city manager, about that. And he said they're actually planning on reducing their electric fund rates in the year going forward. Their electric fund is in fine shape, as most of them are.
This is Mike Philbeck. Let me speak to this. I know a little bit about this. Some of you new ones may not know I was mayor of Shelby from 95 to 03, served on council before that. When I came to city council, Madam Auditor, in 1991, the year before that, 30% of the city's general fund budget had come from electric transfers. That was about the time the debt service for the nuclear power plant after 3 Mile Island had to start being paid down instead of interest only. When they were transferring that much to keep tax rates lower, it was simply doable because the electric fund was so profitable and they tracked Duke Power rates. Once Harlan Boyles spoke up back in those days and said, now that you have to have higher rates, you've got to cut these transfers. By the time I left office in 03, the electric transfer was well under $500,000. And I forget the exact formula that Treasurer Boyles had recommended that we followed, but it amounted to about what franchise tax would have been had we been Duke customers. And the year since I left, it's obviously inched up some, but they now have a $30 million general fund budget and it's 1.3 million. It was 2.4 million when they had an $8 million budget. So it has, Madam Auditor, been reduced substantially. But it is a practice that has gone on in the cities for a long time, but just got out of hand because we had to pay more as citizens of the town to pay off the debt. One other thing I'd say is it is true, it's in their budget proposal that electric rates will be reduced 3% this year. And as a former person there, but just simply a citizen now for now 18 years, I'd say that they're just 2 or 3 years late on lowering the electric rates, because when we gave that new debt to the Power Agency 1, Shelby did not reduce it anywhere near the 6% that their rates were reduced. So I'm glad to see them doing it now, but the people overwhelmingly passed these $6 million bonds. In November is like 3 to 1 or 4 to 1. It was overwhelmingly passed for street improvements. And Sharon, they didn't issue 10 million last September. What they did was get authorization for 10 million. I think this is 6 of the 10 million that was authorized.
Thank you for clarifying that.
But anyway, I wouldn't be as overly concerned as the auditor because I know the trend has been down, but it probably needs to be down a little more and lessen until their rates are at least at parity with Duke.
Well, no, what I'm looking for again is that, you know, there's a reason that the general fund gets its revenues, pays for things it's supposed to, because that source may be different from the utility. And there's a reason all this is supposed to be self-sustaining. But to hear that they are lowering the electric rates is exactly what I was looking for, because they don't need to be one group of users doesn't need to be carrying the expense of another group of users in a different arena. So I'm satisfied with that. If they are really coming down on their rates, I think you said 3%. If they're coming down on their rates, I'm satisfied with that.
I just got that phone call was from Shelby and the city manager, and the FO would like to speak.
May I ask a question before?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I apologize.
My question can only be answered probably by the city of Shelby.
Okay. I apologize.
And that is, that's quite all right. And that is, does the city of Shelby's utility service any citizens that are not inside the city of Shelby, who cannot vote for the city council that's doing this? All right, that's the first thing, because I know that there are some cities, at least in the east, that their utilities service not only the citizens of the city, but they go outside the citizens and service people who don't vote for the city council, who cannot vote for the city council. Second, there are also cities who part of the city is serviced by the city utilities and part of the city is serviced by someone else, by private utility. And so what I'm trying to see is everybody equally yoked here? Or are there some people not not being, who are more adversely impacted than others by this? Or is everybody just paying the higher rates, which is also, for in my mind, just a tax that they can't deduct on their federal income tax?
Thank you, Secretary Penny.
I would see the Director of Finance, her audio is not connected. So that's why I can see it's not connected. If she can connect that audio, she can.
Okay. Ms. Beam or any of the other representatives can connect to their meeting links with the audio. We can share their comments, but right now we have no way to connect to those folks.
Okay.
Still not connected, Debbie?
Correct. I'm waiting to see if anyone else who had indicated they might have connects here. But
Anybody else?
do you want me to call them back? I'm sure they
While you're doing that, this is Mike Philbeck. Secretary Penny, I can tell you that from my past history in Shelby, hardly anyone is on city electric that is not in the city. There may be a handful that requested it or whatever at some past time. The bigger issue in Shelby was that all the involuntary annexations that were done in the 90s and early 2000s, which were substantial, those customers were mostly on Duke Energy. And so while the vast majority of Shelby in terms of population is on the city system, there are several thousand that are on the Duke system that are in the city.
So my problem with that is they didn't contribute to the $1.3 million that reduced their property taxes.
Well, except that, Secretary Penny, the city, while it's now static and it was changed and it doesn't go up, they're still getting the old 3% number, whatever it was, for the franchise tax from Duke.
But those who aren't on the Shelby utilities aren't going to pay those anyway.
Well, the citizens on the Duke system, unless it's changed, and I wish Rick could get on.
They're paying through Duke.
Yeah, they're paying through Duke the franchise tax to the city. It used to be 3%, but some years ago, the legislature stopped it in its tracks and they didn't take it away, but it has no growth. Unless it's changed, the auditor or someone may know more than I do about that.
Hey, just 3% of the city.
We do. For our commission members, we do have the finance officer now connected to it.
Yes. Okay. They can unmute.
Ms. Beam, you're muted on your end. If you could unmute. Ms. Beam, are you able to unmute? Mr. Howe, are you able to hear us? Mr. Howe?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Howe, City Manager for the City of Shelby.
So I did want to take the opportunity to address some of the comments that were made regarding the electric transfer. First and foremost, I want the state auditor to understand the city respectfully is not thumbing its nose whatsoever at the Local Government Commission. We have a great deal of respect for the State Treasurer's Office and the Local Government Commission. I've been in local government for 35 years. and have always held the organization in high esteem, as has the city of Shelby. The city does have an existing policy that was adopted in 1999 by City Council that essentially says that we will not transfer more than 3% of the value of the gross fixed assets from the electric fund to the general fund. City Council had been made aware many, many times of that policy, and are very, very aware of it and understand the importance of that policy. They also understand that the electric fund, the electric customers are subsidizing the general fund by making that transfer. And it has been a goal of council to reduce that amount. We have unfortunately not been able to reduce it. We have kept it stable for the past 5 years. We have had discussions about reducing that transfer. So that is all very well understood. I am not aware of any outside the city customers that we have. If we do, it might be one small commercial customer here and there, but I'm not aware of it if we do, and I've been here 17 years. We have about 9,800 households in the city of Shelby, and about 7,900 of those customers are on the city electric system. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I do have Mayor Stan Anthony with me, along with Beth Beam, the city finance director.
This is Mike Philbeck again. That policy he mentions, Auditor Wood, I remember that being adopted. I didn't remember exactly the details of it, but that was Treasurer Harlan Boyle's strong suggestion at that time in order to reduce transfers because of the payments that were coming due and we were having to pay, and to try to keep rates equitable for city customers compared to IOUs. So that's where that came from. That came from the Treasurer's office back in the late 90s.
I would also like to note the city is current on any debt service payments. We have not been late. We have not missed any debt service payments. City Council adopted the budget last night with a 3% electric rate reduction. We have held our rates steady for the past 6 to 7 years. And the electric fund is in sound shape, as I believe the general fund is. Our fund balance is on the rise. We anticipate that will increase again this year. And we are hoping to reduce some costs so that we can reduce the electric transfer in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Howell and the folks from Shelby. Do any other LGC members have questions? All right, hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve City of Shelby for $6 million of DO bond?
I move approval, Mike Philbeck.
Second, Nancy Hoffman.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll. Cindy?
All right, City of Shelby, Philbeck, Hoffman. Auditor Wood?
Aye.
Thank you. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Secretary Penny?
Aye.
Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
And Mr. Brent?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you, Cindy. Again, thank you to the folks from City of Shelby. Appreciate your participating. All right, that is the end of our FPIC items for this meeting. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. There is one item I want to pull off the consent agenda and just discuss it separately, and that's Cabarrus County. And we'll do that after we deal with the rest of the consent agenda. The consent agenda starts with the city of Asheville with a financing agreement for $42 million and ends the town of Whiteville under the miscellaneous action items for a loan increase for their revolving loan. Are there any questions or any other items commission members would like to removed from the consent agenda.
I have one to discuss. I just have a question about it. I don't know if it should be removed. That's the In Living Charlotte project. And I think it's just a typo or some, because I don't think my math is that bad. You want to pull it or you just want to talk about
Just go ahead and ask your question.
it? Okay. When it talks about it, it talks about being, I mean, I know all these things are important for bond rating and all that kind of stuff. Seems to me there's a discrepancy. It talks about developing 200 units. And then when you apportion it out, which one are different percents of the median income and you add them up, we're talking about 400 units.
Jennifer, can you answer that question?
Sure. There are, it's just the 200 units. They do have the different types of the area median income associated with these units, but in total, there's only 200 units for that one.
I think it's my misreading. I'm willing to admit that. I thought it was 200 units and then 1 bedroom of 20. I added those all up and.
Oh, no, that's the configuration of the 200 unit.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We're still working on fixing that mice type for you, Secretary Marshall.
Well, I would appreciate that.
And for the rest of us. All right, so we have the consent agenda starting with Asheville and ending with Whiteville, with Cabarrus County being considered separately. Do I hear a motion and a second to approve?
Move approval, Auditor Wood.
We have a second?
Second, Nancy Hoffman.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. All right, any further discussion?
Again,
If
I have
not,
one other question.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
On the University Health System of Eastern North Carolina, it says these proposed bonds will not be rated. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, ma'am. These are not going to be rated because it's held by a bank, so it's not a public sale.
Any other discussion?
Do you know if the employees at the Greenville Hospital System now, are they going to be covered by the local government retirement system, or do they have a separate retirement system?
You know, Jennifer?
I don't. More than likely, they would probably still fall under the plan that was offered by what was known a few months ago as Vidant. But I can look into that, but I don't think that that is the case.
You do not think it is the case?
I do not.
And so is that, are you saying, Jennifer, then that the employees that were covered under the local government or the state retirement system, either one of them, they're satisfied with losing their local government or state retirement system and going under the one that the hospital is offering?
So I think that would only apply when it went from Pitt Memorial Hospital to Vidant, and that was many years ago. This is now a partnership to say that it's partnered with ECU Health, and that's the given name right now. So I think it was Vidant was a nonprofit, was recognized as a nonprofit hospital. So that would have been separate anyways.
So when they merged with the university's School of Health or School of Medicine, all of those people that were working with the university, am I hearing you say that they are not a part of the state retirement system and they're part of Vidant's retirement system?
So I think that's a different group. because the doctors group and everything was separate. I mean, I can look in, I don't know off the top of my head, so I don't want to give you incorrect information. But I
Just
don't,
check that because
I
I
don't
get,
think it, I don't think it's with the local government. No.
what about the university employees that are now part of it, that were under the state retirement system? If you
I
could
don't
just
have-
look at that, Jennifer, and then, because I get different answers when I talk to different people at East Carolina.
Sure, I'll research that for you.
All right, thank you, Jennifer.
I've asked one of our staff to check that out, and hopefully they get back to us before the end of the meeting. All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, Cindy, if you would please call the roll.
All right, we had a motion, Wood, second Hoffman. Secretary Marshall? Secretary Penny?
Aye.
Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
And Mr. Brent?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, we will now go over the Cabarrus County item that the treasurer had asked us to discuss separately from the consent agenda. Cabarrus County is asking for approval for a $15 million installment purchase financing agreement. It's a private loan. They are pursuing this project as a public-private partnership with a developer to construct a library and senior center in the western part of the county. The county's going to lease the building for a term of 20 years from the developer, during which time the county intends to purchase the project. They are, the initial term of the lease rather is 240 months, but the county will have the option again to purchase from the landlord for an amount equal to the sum of the rent over the previous 12 months divided by the capitalization rate of 0.069. During the first 2 years, the developer will construct the outer shell of the building, and then the county will come back in 2024 to request an additional 10 to 12 million for the upfit and to furnish the interior. They plan to ultimately again purchase the building in 2026. They do not expect a tax increase to be necessary to make the lease payments. And those payments will be made, of course, from the general fund. The terms of this lease are again $15 million for a 20-year term. And again, it's a private installment purchase bank placement, or not bank placement, installment purchase agreement. It's a private loan with the developer.
Madam Secretary, we do have the Deputy County Manager of Cabarrus County, Mr. Rodney Harris, online.
Thank you, Victoria. Any questions for Mr. Harris or for staff about this particular transaction?
Sharon, I do. Help me with the, so they're borrowing 15 million now. They're going into a public-private partnership with a developer. The developer is going to build a shell. And then they're going to come back in 2 years and borrow some more money to upfit it.
Correct.
Is the developer upfitting it? I mean, they're going to borrow money to build a shell. They don't even have a turnkey project. They're leasing it from the developer. Has somebody on your staff needs to help me with why this makes sense? Just saying it out of my own mouth, that doesn't mean anything. Because they could end up in 2 years with 2 shells that nobody can use and a debt of 15 million. True or false?
Jennifer, I'll let you go through the details of this.
Sure. And I'd like to get all the detailed information from the county because we did ask these questions. It's the borrowing amount up to the 15 million, which would be the entire lease as we understand it. However, it would be broken up so that they wouldn't pay that amount until they purchased it. So they would make lease payments until I believe they can purchase it 1 year after they have moved in and are using the building. So it would probably be at least year 3 or 4 before they can actually purchase it, because then they, if they're here now borrowing for the shell, it's get built and then they upfit it in 2 years, then they would need 1 full year of being an occupant before the lease allows for them to purchase it. So we also ask about the possibility of them just, as you said, Auditor Wood, getting a turnkey project, and the county can speak to that more. However, they said that there was no available land for the county to purchase in that area, and this was basically their only option to get their citizens in that area of the county those particular services.
And I'm not questioning what's there or what I'm questioning, and my question was, and I don't think it's been answered yet, is it a possibility that you build 2 shells, they're on the hook for $15 million, because the county borrowing the money, right?
It's county borrowing money,
right.
Yes.
So they're on the hook for $15 million and they have 2 shells sitting there. Do we not believe it's going to take $15 million to build it? Yes, up to. And so at the end, they could have 2 shells, have borrowed $15 million. Something could happen, and they're stuck with 2 shells and a $15 million debt. Yes or no?
And
Yes.
can I jump in there, Jennifer?
Absolutely.
So I just want to back up a little bit because I think we're really discussing this project in the right way. So,
excuse me, who's
Rodney,
speaking?
please introduce yourself.
Sorry, this is Rodney Harris, Deputy County Manager here in Cabarrus. The developer is delivering a shell as part of the lease agreement. So we are not borrowing money. We are using general fund revenue to support that lease. They are delivering the shell, and the reason that they're not delivering a turnkey building is because anything that the developer does, we as a county are going to pay them profit for that. And so it is not in our economic interest to allow them to build the entire facility. And that is the reason we are going to borrow money in 2 years for the upfit of the interior of that space. And then, as I said, we will come back in 2026 and purchase the building. And we expect that to be in the $10 to $12 million range to acquire the facility.
Then why are you borrowing the money now if you don't? I don't understand.
We're not borrowing money now. We need the approval from the LGC of the installment financing agreement. We're not borrowing any money today.
But we wanted to bring this to your attention because it will involve future debt. And as you were saying, this lease will lead to debt in the future, not only once, but twice is the way that it is being presented. Once to purchase it and once to upfit it.
So now you're telling me that they can lease for 2 years and walk away from these 2 shells.
So it'll be it's one building that they're putting together. So they're building a shell and then
one building too, it doesn't matter. So you will lease it, you could lease it for 2 years and this thing go awry and you will walk away and leave the developer with a shell and you're done. And you will be only out 2 years worth of lease payments.
No, the lease agreement will be a 20-year term. But that lease payment will be within our general fund operating budget, not borrowed.
This,
Other questions for Mr. Harris?
Paul Butler.
Go ahead, Mr. Butler. Mr. Butler, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Does the developer own the dirt? Who owns the dirt? Can you hear me now, Sharon?
Yes, we can. Mr. Harris, can you answer that question?
Today, the developer.
Who owns the dirt?
The developer does, correct.
So developer. And this is the only site you can find in that part of the county for this facility?
We have been looking for 5 years, and it is the only site we've identified.
Is it on a public water and sewer system?
It is, City of Kannapolis.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
It is on public water and sewer.
So basically what you're saying is that the developer won't sell it to you, let you do your own thing. They want something out of this.
That is accurate.
Darren, I just need to be made comfortable that the county is not going to get stuck. And I'm not sure I am comfortable with that. If anybody else, Mr. Philbeck, Ms. Hoffman, if any of you others are comfortable with this and understand it better than I do, please help me. I don't want to withhold from a county something they need, but it still doesn't mean they can get into a deal that is not in the best interest of the county. So help me.
Well, this is Mike Philbeck. I don't know that I can help it. It sounds different than anything I have heard in economic development, but does the staff or anyone know, is this a first in North Carolina for this type of economic development?
I'll let Jennifer speak to the details on that, but P3s, have been allowed for a while now. So this is not
that common, but they're not that common, are they, Sharon? Not in local
they're not
government?
all that common, but it's not the first one the commission has been asked to approve.
What, the only other one that I can remember has been through DOT though.
Is this Paul Butler? Is this time sensitive? Is this something we can put off and bring it up at the next LGC meeting and let's think about it a little bit more?
Jennifer, what would be the consequences of putting this off a month?
We don't have anything at the commission staff level. I would have to defer to the county to see if there was something that was time sensitive.
I mean, the developer owns the dirt. It's not going to go away. There's nobody else to build it. I mean, unless somebody knows something that I'm not seeing here, that we just kind of think through this for a month.
I think from the county's perspective, the impact is to the project timeline. This was deferred from the agenda last month, and so this would be a second deferral. And we have pending awards to get the project moving so that we can meet our opening date. So another month delay would further put us behind.
But
And
you're
just to
opening,
clarify, we did not bring this to the commission last month because we were not ready to present. So
So it did not get deferred last month. I didn't think I'd heard anything about this before.
no, staff deferred putting it on the agenda last month.
Okay.
Mr. Butler, go ahead with your question, please.
well, the schedule is when the building is built, then the county's going to come back in and refit. And And for us to be comfortable with this, just another a 30-day delay, it seemed to me like it would be a prudent thing for us to do.
I have a question for the staff. May I ask, is there anything about, the questions revolve around the structure of the transaction, but is there anything about the debt or the position that the city or the county is in that raises any alarm bells by our normal standards when you look at this? Because this was on the consent agenda, right? So it seems to me that our discussion right now is about the structure of the underlying transaction. Is that right?
No, the discussion is around approving this, and the county be on the hook for something they can't use. And so I hear where you're going with this. Is this in our purview to have this discussion? And I say it is.
Understood. I'm just trying to be sure. I'm new to this sport, and so I struggle with the line within which we are analyzing debt incurment by municipalities and other entities according to certain standards that we've established and the statutes have established, and then public policy decisions made by elected bodies. And I'm sort of struggling of where we're supposed to come down on those issues. I don't see us as a super city council. I'd see us as a debt management. And Madam Auditor, I completely understand your point that we may very well be looking at this and saying you're incurring debt that you can't meet or that won't return an asset that would. So I get that. I'm just trying to find the line. And maybe I'm looking to those with more time on this board to help me with that type of decision.
This is Mike.
I see us as a super city council.
I guess the question I have along the same lines is the misgivings we have about this transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to be the same misgivings we will have any other time this comes up from any other city? Is this a problem with this community, or is it a problem with the transaction in general?
I would say that I'm trying to prevent another Randy Parkman theater, if you will. There you go. That's what I'm trying to prevent.
It's beautiful dirt.
As the person who's been on the traditionally, we have only looked at these things. Is it necessary expedience? Is it adequate, not excessive? Have they managed their debt? Will there be those kind of things? And the politics of the rest of it, the individual decisions that are made are not normally within our purview. I would say this one is a hybrid though, because it is not a standard transaction like we've seen before, where we know what the asset is either existing or what it's exactly going to be. This one is one with a different type of, I'd say, layered, or if you will, partnership agreement that just is a very different. We're not questioning whether they need a senior center. We're questioning, is this a way that we should put the confidence of the LGC behind the financing?
Gotcha.
Because and I think the financing are our issues. So
thank you. That's very helpful.
Let me go back and
what are we being asked to approve here? Can we clarify that?
It's the agreement for the $15 million that they will ultimately spend on this, assuming everything goes as planned.
Okay, but in order for that
will be dispersed right now.
Okay, but in order for that to be payable, they have to exercise the option under the lease. Is that right?
That's the way I understand it. Mr. Harris, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, today we're asking for approval for the lease of the facility. The purchase would be a decision made by a future county commission that would come back to the LGC.
But isn't the lease a 20-year lease?
Yes.
Yes.
So if you approve it today, they may pay for 20 years on a shell that never got upfitted. And that is a waste of taxpayer dollars and zero interest.
Yeah, I think what I would say on that, Auditor Wood, is, and we have shared this with staff, is we have a definitive plan on how the upfit will be funded. We intend to come back in 2 years and request the debt. And if that was not approved, which I don't see any reason that it would not be, given that we're a AAA county. But if it were not approved, we would use cash on hand in our reserves to pay for the upfit. So there is no risk from the county's perspective and from our board's perspective that we would have a building that was not usable. We will get it across the finish line either through the debt, or if for whatever reason that were not approved, we would use cash on hand.
But this is Paul Butler. That'd be decided by a future Board of County Commissioners 2 years from now. Is that correct?
It'll be decided by the board at the time, correct?
Which, if this became an issue in Cabarrus County and a new board didn't see it the same way, just like Auditor Wood is saying, you'd be sitting there with a shell.
Because they're locked into a 20-year lease, right?
Yeah, may I ask a question? If it's a 20-year lease, but there is an option, is that what there is to exercise? If the county doesn't exercise that, doesn't that abrogate, say, the last 18 years of the lease? Is that how it's written?
So it is written as a 20-year lease with the option to purchase in increments of 5 years. Our intention is to buy it after the first year.
So it's not announced.
I have another question. What would cause you not to upfit? I mean, obviously it's the decision of a future commission, but you're obligating the county to lease this facility for the purposes stated, and you wouldn't be able to exercise those purposes if the upfit doesn't happen, right? As the auditor said, you just have a shell.
That
if you want to use it as senior center, you've got to do the upfit to use the building that you want to use it for. So as I'm sitting here struggling through this, the only reason why the county might get stuck with a shell and a 20-year lease is a decision not to have the senior center there. Because if you're going to do it, you're going to upfit it, right? And so it'd be the county's own decision. It's not like some outside force would come in and prevent you from exercising that option or upfitting the building.
Except another council.
Except another commission. Right. Mr. Assistant Manager, am I correct in that assumption? This is John.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I think it speaks to the point made earlier about, local decisions, and ultimately a commission could decide in 2 years to pay almost $800,000 a year for a lease for a building they can't use. I'd like to think that no commission would make that decision.
Understood. Thank you.
I don't think they would be making a decision to move through 18 more years to pay for a building they can't use. The decision might be is not to go incur any more debt to pay for the upfit. Or
the county has assured us that if they don't issue debt for the upfit, they'll pay for it out of fund balance.
They'll use cash.
And on that, each year at the close of our books, we have a minimum fund balance policy. For the last 2 years, we've had in excess of $15 million that is transferred over for capital projects. So we know within the 2-year period, we will have sufficient money to fund this project with cash if we need to.
Is the decision today to fund the 20-year lease or just to approve this business structure?
This is Cindy Aiken. Just correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, this looks like we're approving a long-term lease under
Correct.
159, under 159-148, the financing.
But not the funding of it.
Correct.
No.
They're funding
It-
the lease
it is-
payments
it
out
is
of the
the
general
lease.
fund.
It is the lease, but because there are future possible obligations, whether it is debt or cash, we wanted to have this discussion.
this is Cindy again, but today it is a contract to pay funds over $500,000 for more than 5 years. So it falls under the LGC's, at least in a capital asset.
Correct.
Is that correct?
And there'll be another funding request.
Should they,
At
yes,
some time.
should they wish to borrow money for the upfit part, they would have to come back. Yes. Did I state that, did Secretary Marshall and I state that correctly?
Yes.
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 Assume that this lease is alienable. If in fact a future city commission said that they didn't want it, they could sublet this thing.
Well, I personally have, this is Cindy, I haven't seen the documents, but that's a question for the county manager.
Is this the only financing way that they've looked at this project?
Well,
Because of the location and the county's inability to find another feasible piece of property, the developer already owned this property, and so this is what the developer wanted to do with it. So in order to keep the facility where the county wanted to place it, which I'm sure had implications with public transportation and access, this was basically the only option the developer was willing to consider. Ronnie, do you know if there's a
Sure.
possibility of
Whereabouts in Cabarrus County are they talking about building this?
It is in the, I'm having trouble reading this type today myself. It's in Kannapolis, correct? In the western
Yeah, so
part of
this
the county?
is a little bit north of Concord Mills and the Motor Speedway, right off of I-85. It's a major shopping center, Afton Ridge. It's right across the line into Kannapolis from the city of Concord.
Okay, thank you. And is there a possibility of the county subletting the building if for whatever reason, the commissioners decide not to move forward with the?
Now, the agreement that we have drafted has specific uses, which are limited to governmental uses.
This boils down to whether or not the city has enough ability to repay the debt that we're talking about today, which is what? $15 million.
Yes.
That is not that's not my holdup, and that is not my question. The state auditor would. I know that the city can pay this back. I know that they can afford this. They have a AAA credit rating. The problem for me is that I'm proving a lease for a useless asset. That's my problem.
I'm not asking the question. This is Cindy Aiken. I'm not a member, but Jennifer, if this is this part of it coming under the P3 statute? I'm just trying to refresh my memory because we don't look at it that often. Was there a public hearing requirement in the P for this? Or maybe the deputy manager can answer that, just for another context.
Yes, we did hold a public hearing. We did public notice in the newspaper for this project, and we have not had any opposition to it, and our board is fully supportive.
Of course, this board is. Again, I'm supposed to be about issuing debt, approving 0% interest debt that supports an asset that people can use. And again, you're asking me to approve a lease that I don't know if it's going to be useful, if it ever gets used. And I'm struggling with a guarantee that this thing's going to move forward, and I'm not approving a 20-year lease that the county's going to be stuck with on a useless asset. That is what I am struggling with. Somebody help me.
This is Mike Philbeck. I get Auditor Wood's question. I get what Mr. Burns said. I think I get what Secretary Marshall said. And I guess I don't recall anything like this, but the county is willing to take that risk, Auditor Wood, and we know they can afford it. So I think it doesn't fall back on us if they have a useless asset. I think it falls back on the county made a bad decision, but they can't afford it, and it becomes a local political problem. That's just the way it seems to me at this point.
If that was the case, then we wouldn't be here for any approval of debt. Everybody could go make all the bad debt decisions they wanted to. If that,
Not everybody, only those that could clearly afford that one bad debt.
Does the county have any safeguards in place that would address Auditor Woods' concerns?
Thank you.
I say the commission's concerns.
So I think I'd say two things. One, I talked earlier about the upfit and the cash on hand approach. So we're confident we have resources there. I think the second is, and I alluded to this earlier, we did originally have the intent of the developer doing the whole project so that it was turnkey, which addresses Auditor Wood's concern. The problem is that costs our taxpayers $2 to $3 million more than if we do it ourselves. So we did not think that was in the best interest of our local taxpayers to do a turnkey solution and allow a developer to get more profit than they should get. And so we think this is sort of the happy median that we can live with. And we think that our resources, our conservative budgeting position us well to make sure this project gets across the finish line.
So Sharon, is there any way to hold the county to their guarantee that this thing will go all the way?
Auditor Woods, you need to get closer to your mic.
Yeah, I didn't hear the first part of your question, Auditor.
Any way for a guarantee from the county that they will carry this all the way if we approve this today, or not approve today because I need this guarantee in writing, but to make sure that I'm approving debt for a usable asset. Is there any way to get a guarantee that will make me comfortable? Even the P3 is not a problem for me. That the structure, none of that is a problem for me. It's the breaking it up and a possibility of ending up with a useless asset. I don't care if it's P3, I don't care how they go about it. That is not a problem for me. It's breaking it up so that they may end up with a useless asset that's going to cost the taxpayers a lot more than $2 or $3 million. So Sharon, can we go about this? Can we postpone this and get some kind of guarantee from the county that this will go through? And I don't know that, I don't even know if it's possible, but that's about the only way I'm going to vote a yes today, because I'm just not voting for a lease on a useless asset. And structured like it is, within the law, within the contracts, within the agreement, what I am giving them the ability to do is go into a lease agreement on a useless asset. And I'm not doing that.
All right, so I think there's,
That's
I'm sorry, I can't hear who's speaking.
Sorry, we were just a little side talk here.
Okay.
Secretary Perry asked if they can do that, and I think the problem would be one commission binding a future commission. I don't think they can do that.
Yeah, I was going to ask Cindy about that. From our perspective, we can certainly table this. I know the county would not be happy with that because it will delay the project, but we don't have any legal reason that we that I'm aware of that we can't table it for a month. Am I correct, Jennifer?
And Commissioner Burns is right. I remember that. Yeah, that's right. You cannot obligate a future commissioner. So that makes sense, Commissioner Burns.
This is Cindy. This is Cindy. The lease is a type of binding of the future boards, but that's different because that's a contract between two parties.
Yeah.
As opposed to one board saying, hey, board, 2 years from now, board, you will do this.
Right. The problem with, and, you know, if it gets voted down, it gets voted down. But the problem with delaying it is it's going to be the same problematic contract a month from now. So, I mean.
Not if you can bring some
Let's
kind of.
vote this thing up or vote this thing down. I really, you know, I don't have a dog in this fight, but let's vote it up or vote it down.
Well, my vote would be different if you could assure me that I'm not voting on a useless asset. And right now, the way it's structured, the asset is useless to anybody.
And I don't think a month from now we're going to be able to do that. You're going to have a legitimate problem a month from now.
Okay. All right, vote it then. I don't care. Go.
So
Approval.
Second.
I'm sorry, I did not. Who made the motion?
Second by Marshall.
And my internet's picking a fine time to break up on me.
No, theirs is breaking up because I can't hear them either.
Okay.
It's Penny Marshall.
All right. Thank you, Cindy. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
The motion is to approve?
Yes. Jennifer, are you comfortable with this going to a vote or?
Yes.
All right. All right, we have a motion and a second. Cindy, if there's no further discussion, if you'll call the roll.
All right. Auditor Wood?
No.
Thank you. Marshall Penny, Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoffman?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Mr. Brent?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, 7 yes, 2 no. Motion carried.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harris, for being available for questions. All right, we have one non-action item before we get to our unit updates. Suffolk County has a rate modification on a $0.9 million loan. And here, their previous rate on the loan was 2.89%. It was originally a $10 million loan. The balance on it right now is 5.9 million. The rate is moving from 2.89 to 2.34, which will save them almost $132,000. That's an information item only, so we don't need a vote. All right, we'll move now into the unit updates. I will turn it over to Susan for those. And then the last two items on the agenda are going to be regarding East Laurinburg and the dissolution of their charter. But Susan, I'll turn it over to you for the unit updates.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. I'm looking at attachment B for the unit updates. You have unit updates for all 7 of the 8 units that we are currently managing under 181C. The first one I want to talk about is East Laurinburg. There are several resolutions related to the American Rescue Plan policies that are attached for East Laurinburg.
Do you mind if we just clarify too, just again to be clear, because the LGC does wear different hats with regards to East Laurinburg, and you will see other resolutions for East Laurinburg later. These are related to the commission acting as the governing board for financial matters based on the assumption of control. So these are presented to you separately than the one Sharon indicated we'll be talking about later, where you'll be voting in your role as the broader local government commission and those authorities. So I just wanted to clarify why we pulled those out separately, and we'll be looking at these first. Sorry. So that was David Tomasco. Okay. All right. So you have unit summaries for 7 of the 8 units. We don't provide one, of course, for Spencer Mountain because they don't have any transactions. I'm only going to be talking about the ones that we're asking you to vote on. So I've got items that I'm going to be talking to you about: East Laurinburg, Eureka, as well as Spring Lake when we get there. For East Laurinburg, and I apologize that pages are not numbered, but if you, there are 4 different resolutions that are required by the American Rescue Plan funding. And so even though we are, the town of East Laurinburg will be dechartered as of June 30, they did receive the first deposit of ARPA funds, and they will be, the town will be using those. They'll be transferred to the county, and the county will be using them over the course of time to pay for services in East Laurinburg, or what was East Laurinburg. So there are several policies that are required to be adopted for East Laurinburg. The first one is a policy for allowable costs and cost principles for the expenditure of American Rescue Funds. And that resolution, that is a resolution that we worked with. We used the School of Government's template resolution to and modified that one. It's long. It's long. They're long. Okay. The second resolution is related to financial management and internal controls for the town of East Laurinburg. And there is a summary of those attached. The third resolution is the adoption of a non-discrimination policy for the town of East Laurinburg. And the fourth one, I do apologize for flipping, is a records retention policy for documents that are created or maintained pursuant to the American Rescue Plan. Because all of those, even though the town is going away, the documents related to ARPA still need to be maintained, for instance. And so we will, we state who's responsible for that and all of those types of responsibilities. So that is a large part of this big document that you've got right here, is those 4 resolutions. So I'm moving on to Eureka. I'm assuming, Sharon, that we're going to vote for all of these at the same time?
Yes, unless the commission members want to handle things separately.
Okay.
All right. Hearing no objection, vote for them all at once.
Secretary Marshall, there are 5 policies, yes.
Oh, there are 5? Did I miss one? Yeah, this is Cindy. I think it was there's one called eligible use.
Eligible use, so I meant, okay.
Kind of blended in with the.
I apologize about that.
That's
Okay.
okay.
Okay, so there are 5. Okay.
Thank you.
I do apologize. Okay. The second item that I'm going to need you to vote on is for Eureka, the town of Eureka. We need to take a vote for the resolution that is accepting the Viable Utility Reserve Grant. This is a grant for asset and inventory assessment in the amount of $150,000. Y'all voted to apply for this grant. This is, as the governing board of Eureka, you're now voting to accept it. Okay. So it is a different role, as Debbie said. So y'all have seen this study before. This is not anything new. It's just the town has to accept it. Okay? And then the last item that I'm going to need you to vote for is for the town of Spring Lake. And back in the very back of your packet, about 3-4 pages front, there's a budget amendment for the town of Spring Lake. And this is the budget amendments that are required to based on the fire station number 2 loan that we've talked about from South River EMC. That loan was for $1 million, but the actual capital outlay was $1,249,905. So we had to do an amendment so that we could pay the final amounts to the developer and to DOT for the remaining balances on those. And they are using that asset now and have been for a while. So we need to get these final amounts paid. And we wanted to do that before year end. So three items in total to vote for. The 5 resolutions for East Laurinburg related to the American Rescue Plan. The resolution for Eureka accepting the Viable Utility Reserve Grant. And then for Spring Lake, the budget amendments that are related to fire station number 2. Those are the 3 items that I wanted that I need you to vote on today. Any questions? Yes, Secretary Marshall.
Do I understand this correctly? That this has nothing to do with the repayment in any way, shape, or form of the $1 million?
Correct.
And it is just the 2 resources that will be needed to pay off the additional amount over that $1 million that this building cost. And that 230,000 and some change will come from the local option sales tax. How does that impact the town's budget that is, I guess, in process right now, I guess?
Well, the town will be will be budgeting some amount of debt service for that ultimately. But this amount is the final payment. This is for the final payment on the construction that has
This
been
theoretically come out of their money, the fiscal year that we're in right now.
Correct.
Yes.
That's exactly what
Butler. Did we ever
The town actually budgeted in their 2022 budget some portion of funds to start rebuilding the general fund. And this will eat up some of that. Okay. But it is all for the building itself, not the debt. Okay.
And Mr. Butler, you dropped out, your audio dropped out, but I think you were going to ask about the loan with South River.
Yes.
We are still negotiating with South River on that.
Okay, can you hear me now, Sharon?
I can now. Yes, sir.
And what, Sharon, when you say negotiate, I mean, when you say negotiating, what do you mean by that?
We're trying to get the best terms possible for the town of Spring Lake on repayment of that loan.
And what about just the broader overall policy position of co-ops making loans to municipalities and counties in the state? Where are we on that?
Well, if it is over $500,000 or 5 years, it should come before the commission for approval. And, you know, this one did not, which is what's caused all the problems.
Well, have we ever had one where there's been a loan from a co-op to a city or county before?
More than likely, I can't say for sure one way or the other, but more than likely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions about anything that Susan presented before we call for a vote?
Yeah, this is Ms. Harvey. I have a question about the East Laurinburg resolution. As mentioned in the lead up that the funds would ultimately be transferred to the county, and the county would use those to pay for the services in East Laurinburg. Is the county going to be liable to take on these resolutions or similar resolutions for the use of the money? How does that work?
Okay, great question. And when we'll talk about exactly what the county's taken on in just a moment, but these resolutions were necessary to cover the ARPA funds that we spent on behalf of East Laurinburg. The money that's actually going to the county are the funds that have been supplanted by the ARPA funds. So the money that goes to the county will be completely unrestricted and won't have any requirements on it.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right, do I hear a motion to approve all of the resolutions? That would be the resolutions for the ARPA resolutions for East Laurinburg, the resolution accepting the VUR grant for the town of Eureka, and the budget amendment for Spring Lake.
So moved, Nancy Hoffman.
Second, Burns.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hoffman, Mr. Burns. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask Cindy to call the roll.
Hey, excuse me, Auditor Wood?
Aye.
Secretary Marshall? Aye. Secretary Patty?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Thanks. Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Mr. Brent?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We are down to our last two items here regarding the town of East Laurinburg, and we're going to reverse the discussion. We're going to take attachment D first, and this is the update on the East Laurinburg dissolution. And I won't take the time to go through the whole report. It really is an update. The items that have changed since the last time we provided you with this report are highlighted in yellow. The first one is the report of the city services was provided to the town, and they did present that at their board meeting on April the 7th as required. Over on page 2, our next item that we're going to discuss is a resolution of dissolution and authorizing the transfer of all the property to Scotland County. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. The county is set to adopt its companion resolution on June the 21st at their meeting, agreeing to receive all of the assets of East Laurinburg. County also is agreeing to take over the accounts with Duke Energy Progress to provide the streetlights in East Laurinburg for a minimum of 1 year. The staff does continue to work to make sure all debts to vendors, employees, and others have been identified, verified, and paid, and we will continue to do that right up to June 30th. The employees have all been notified their last day of employment is June 30th, unless they resign before that time. We've asked them to consider not doing that, until the county takes over. Waste Management, who had been providing trash and recycling services, has been notified the town will no longer need their services after June 30th. There was no formal contract between East Laurinburg and Waste Management, so there was no contract to cancel. Customers have all been notified via letter of the last day of their trash and recycle services and how they should fill cans and when Waste Management is going to come pick those up. They were also notified that they need to contract for waste services individually or be responsible for disposing of their own trash at county facilities. We tried to find company or companies that would contract that we could recommend to the residents, and we're unable to do so. And we were unable to find another government that was willing to manage that contract. Residents also were informed that the streets would be turned over to the state as of June 30th and that they would no longer be levied a municipal tax. So they're getting a tax cut of 40 cents. A copy of the letter that was provided to the residents is attached to this report. The town did ask us about a month ago to see if we could get some potholes repaired, and by the time we finish paying the bills for that, we will have spent all of the PAL bill money to repair all the potholes. All right, that was not an action item, so I'll move on to the next thing, which is attachment C. And this is the resolution that you got an email about shortly before the LDC meeting started. And we made a modification to this. This is the resolution transferring and conveying property and addressing some other matters with Scotland County. So the first page is a lot of the whereases as to why that we have the authority to do this. The meat of the resolution is over on starts on page 2, and we essentially are conveying all town property, included but not limited to all of the property described on appendices A, B, and C to the county. We will convey and transfer all cash assets that the town holds as of the close of business on June 30th to the county. All their receivables, taxes receivable, assessments receivable, and any other debts, charges, or fees that are owed to the town. We are not aware of any at this time other than the taxes, but anything that crops up would go to the county. We are not aware of any lawsuits that the town is involved in that would, well, we're not aware of any lawsuits, period, but we're certainly not aware of anything that would be settled in favor of the town. But if there is something out there that again crops up, the proceeds from that would go to the county. We have done a vigilant search to see if there are any potential suits pending against the town or other proceedings, and we are not aware of anything at this time. We've notified all the town's vendors that they need to get their bills in. There's not very many, and so that we can get that paid by June 30th. We plan to file the second quarter payroll tax return on June the 30th. We're going to pay the employees a little bit early so that we can get that done. And again, the only pending things out there would be possibly if there are any notices coming from the IRS or from Department of Revenue. We don't know about it this time. You know, that's always a possibility, and the IRS is several years behind. So we're not aware of any errors in the payroll system or the reports that were filed. That I think most of us know that doesn't mean you won't get a notice from the IRS anyway. Again, we're directing all the cash to be transferred to the county. We're asking that the county set aside that cash. We would ask them to set aside an amount to be determined by, and this is one of the changes, an amount to be determined by the county and the LGC staff to pay any unknown or unpaid obligations of the town, including but not limited to accrued taxes, associated penalties and interest, then towards the cost of maintaining the streetlights for a period of no less than 1 year, and then lastly to fulfill any other obligation or indebtedness of the town if sufficient funds remain. This obligates the county, if there are sufficient funds, to keep the streetlights on, which they verbally have agreed to do indefinitely, that this reduces that to writing for the term of at least 1 year. Cindy, did I miss anything?
This is Cindy. No, and I could just say too, I have had several conversations with the county attorney. So we are working together to get documents lined up. And as Sharon said, the County Board of Commissioners is planning to have a companion resolution accepting to be proffered at their June 21st meeting, 2 weeks from today. And the county attorney and I will have documents that, well, let me back up. The statute itself, this is just a new animal. The General Assembly gave the LGC the authority to execute documents. So this is kind of a new thing. And just I guess there are 4 pieces of real estate. So we have a form, a non-warranty deed, but we'll just have all kinds of recitals so that anybody in the future could see, why isn't the town signing this? Well, it's because this is a dissolution. The statute provided the authority. And so we'll have chairman of LGC and secretary to execute. And hopefully that good chain of title, but he and I, Mr. Johnston, are working on we'll have documents. There was something similar that happened with Princeville. There was a transfer of property back in the day. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel totally. And this will just be easier because it's not a complicated sewer system, right? So some documents may roll over past July 1st, but our goal is to try to get everything lined up right at June 30th.
How many employees are we talking?
Sharon, a number of employees, Sharon, are they all part-time?
3 very part-time employees.
So no benefits.
Correct.
No benefits, no. And they were given a 2-week pay bonus also.
And then according to the statute, if you're familiar with the show Brigadoon, the town will just disappear. All their ordinances are null and void, and this is all per statute. And life will go on a little bit different for the citizens, but they will have less taxes, but no trash pickup. Yes, Secretary Marshall has a question.
I assume there are some tax bills that are delinquent and overdue. Have those people been informed that they are to pay that amount to the county? Responsibility.
I believe that the county is collecting already anyway. Is that right, Sharon?
Yes, the county's already collected their taxes, and they will just continue to try to collect those past due taxes. We did check with the School of Government, and those are still valid tax bills, even though the town is dissolving. So the county will continue to try to collect those.
Just another question. I see that the effective date for the resolution is June 30. Is that at all contingent on the vote of the county on the 21st of June?
This document doesn't say that, but, yes, that would be, that is the best of all worlds. The county agrees. We've had verbal, discussions with the staff, but it's our understanding that they will go ahead with and approve this. And the
Is there
state
a plan in the unlikely scenario that they say no?
Can't be any worse. I was thinking about, this is Cindy, I was thinking about that this morning, and the last known dissolution, what was that, Centerville maybe? And
Yes.
property went to a not-for-profit entity, and should the county decide, you know what, no, we'll just have to figure something else out. And then whether this June 30th is still valid, I don't know. We've been operating all along with conversations with county staff that this was a go.
The citizens on septic tanks and wells or what?
The city of Laurinburg provides water sewer to East Laurinburg.
All right.
It's on that letter, isn't it?
And so that will just continue. Any other questions about the resolution modified as what was distributed to you right before the meeting?
It was just those couple sentences in section 8. It's the change.
That was
Sharon
the
read
only-
that.
All right, did we have
Yeah,
a motion and
This
a
is
second?
Paul.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Butler, go ahead.
Sharon, I just wanted, this responsibility was conveyed to the LGC during the last session of the General Assembly. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So prior to this, did somebody in the General Assembly handle this if a charter was going to be taken down by a municipality?
Yes,
I mean,
it was handled by a local bill.
So the reason this responsibility is passed on to the LGC is an act of the North Carolina General Assembly.
Correct. And Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but they still have the authority to also decharter a town, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
We just hate that if they want to do one on their own, wouldn't we? Okay, thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
And possibly, maybe it was before Mr. Butler was appointed, we had at least one resolution from the commission requesting the General Assembly Act at least once, and some verbal conversations with the local delegation to urge and encourage them to do so, but that was not accomplished on the General Assembly.
You're talking about in reference to East Laurinburg.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, I'm very much aware of those conversations. I'm very much aware of why it ended up with the LGC and not with the General Assembly. How lucky we were. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do I hear a motion and a second to approve the resolution?
So moved. Burns.
Second, Marshall.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Cindy, if you would call the roll, please.
Okay. I shall. That's Burns, Marshall, Auditor Wood. Is she there? I lost her. Three of these. Can you tell? I don't see
She put in chat, she had to leave at 3:25.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so absent. Secretary Penny,
Sadly, yes.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
thank you. Ms. Harvey,
Aye.
you, Councilwoman Hoffman,
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck,
Aye.
and Mr. Brent.
Aye.
Thank you. 8-0, 1 absent.
Right. Thank you. Does anyone have any other items for discussion or anything else that needs to come before the commission? All right, you will be getting more information shortly about the 2 off-site meetings the treasurer spoke of. We do have a room block reserved up in Silva, the Western Carolina meeting, and we're making arrangements at the 4-H Center for the Eastern meeting in Terrell County.
What is the date of the Eastern one?
September 22nd.
September 22nd. Thank you.
There's a date change on the September meeting as well as a location change. The November meeting, the date remains unchanged, the location changes.
What time does the September 22nd meeting?
I'm gonna miss that one.
We were retaining the 1:30 meeting start time for both at this point.
I'll just note for y'all that I'm gonna have to miss that meeting. The September meeting, that's the week of the hearing on the North Carolina carbon plan. I will be fully engaged on that. I'll make it if I can get there, but very unlikely.
Sharon, too, regarding meeting logistics, we do have the budget hearings beginning next Monday. 3 budget hearings on Monday, the 13th, 2 budget hearings on Monday, the 20th. And we'll be getting all those materials and invitations sent out this week for our members.
You should have all received the budget messages last week.
Sharon, this is Paul Butler.
Yes, sir.
Sharon, on the off-site meetings, how are you thinking we're going to get there that day or come the day before? How long do you think we're going to be up there?
For the one in Terrell County, as far as I know, that will just be a regular meeting. I don't think we're going to have any additional sessions or anything like that. And we'll let you know if that changes.
So that's an up and back in the same day.
That's, well, for staff, we'll go the day before just to make sure we get everything arranged and everything's working. And so that there are accommodations.
I've done that.
But my budget office won't cover it overnight for something like that.
Silva?
Set up.
No, not Silva, but
Yeah.
Terrell
Oh,
County.
It's about 5 hours.
I understand, but if you finish by 5 o'clock, they expect you to get that home.
I got friends in that area.
So Sharon, are you saying Terrell County is going to be up and back in a day? Is that the plan?
I think, I can't answer that question for everyone.
What about the one in the western part of the state?
The Western, again, will have a room block, make reservations there. We are expecting to have additional activities, most likely after the LGC meeting, with students and the staff and professors there at Western. You know, those, at least my understanding is those will not be any sort of official meetings, so you won't be required to stay and participate, but we are hoping that a lot of you will choose to participate. They've been very engaged with us about having the students involved.
Is that a drive up the day before or drive up that morning to Cullowhee?
But what we had anticipated was setting up the extra activities after the LGC meeting is drive up that morning, spend the night, Tuesday night.
At least 2 hours
After
for
the
the east. or more. That's 5 hours from here. 5 hours. Unless you go to some southern.
Any further questions about that?
Minnesota.
I'm old.
I'm finishing up some procedure changes at about 5 o'clock. And I have something in the afternoon of Friday. And my folks said, I have to come back and then go out Friday morning. And I said, the hell you say? My weary body is not that.
I just brought this up from White Lake. It's 5 hours and 48 minutes from White Lake to Colorway.
We'll have more information at future meetings about both of these, so.
Stop the sheets on the way. That's right.
Get out of Raleigh.
All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Something I mean.
Second.
Multiple seconds. So Ms. Hawkins.
Multiple seconds. All right, motion second. Cindy, if you please call the roll.
I think it was, Ms. Hoffman, was that you?
Yes, it was.
The treasurer just walked in. Is there anything anybody wants to ask?
No, let's go before it gets to gavel out.
Alder Woods absent. Marshall. Penny. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm with you.
Burns. Butler.
Yes.
Thank you. Harvey.
Aye.
Philbeck.
Aye.
Mr. Britton.
Aye.
All right. Mr. Terry. Yeah, gavel us out.
I'm gonna gavel those socks out, Secretary. Thank you, Victoria.